Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to today's read aloud of Mr. Terupt Falls Again. Just a little bit of a reminder, if you need to follow along and you need to get caught up, the previous videos of the read alouds are all up on YouTube, so you can join along with us. Some of you have the book, some of you don't. If you don't, that's okay. You can just sit back and relax and listen. So here we go. Today's perspective is from Anna, and we're on page 38. Mr. Terupt sent his book team, that's what he called me and Peter after all the book moving we did this summer, to the library to get copies of the Weston game. Lexi and Luke came with us because they had arrived early that morning as well. Mr. Terupt didn't need to send all four of us, but the errand gave us something to do. The plan was to start the Weston game later that day. But that didn't actually happen because, well, something else did. We stopped in the office on our way back from the library to pick up Mr. Terupt's mail as a favor to him. That's when Luke made one of his famous observations. Ever since his summer science camp, he was determined to notice everything like a detective. He would say, "I don't think his brain ever stops working." "Where's Mrs. Williams?" Luke asked. "She's always here for the morning announcements." "Maybe she's in the bathroom," Lexi said. "Doing what, powdering her nose?" Peter wisecracked. Those two never stopped going back and forth. They reminded me of that old cartoon with the coyote and Roadrunner. The Roadrunner always outwitted the coyote, but the coyote never learned. Lexi was the Roadrunner. After Peter made his wisecrack, she reached over when he wasn't looking and knocked all the books out of his hands. Sounds like Lexi, everyone. "Hey, you jerk," Peter yelled. "You're gonna get it." "Whatever," Lexi said. She walked out of the office with a smirk and an extra shake in her lips. In my head, I heard her saying, "Beep, beep," like the Roadrunner. She'd won again. I helped Peter pick up his books. Then we left the office behind Lexi and Luke. I did wonder where Mrs. Williams was. But Lexi's answer made sense. I decided not to worry about it. But that changed once we got to the doors heading down to the annex. Just as we pushed them open, Ms. Newberry came running through in the opposite direction. She was crying, and she didn't stop to talk. "Must be her time of the month, all emotional and sensitive like that," Lexi said. "Must be your time of the month to be stupid," Peter said. "Wait, that's every day for you." I didn't even know what they were talking about, time of the month, and I didn't get a chance to ask, nor did Lexi get a chance to come back at Peter, because Luke made another one of his observations, and this was a big one. "Look," he pointed. An ambulance and a police car were parked next to the annex. Peter's books fell all over the ground, this time without anyone's help. As he took off, sprinting towards our classroom, when Mr. Terupt collapsed after being hit by Peter's snowball, I was scared. Scared like I'd never been before. I didn't know what to do. I sank to my knees in horror. My hands covered my mouth and tears ran down my cheeks. I hoped I'd never feel like that again, certainly not so soon. But the sight of that ambulance, Ms. Newberry rushing by us crying, and Peter running to our classroom all took me back to that day in the snow. Oh boy. All right, we're going to read one more section. So something is clearly going on with Ms. Newberry. Was just spotted running through the hall crying, and there's some police officers outside. All right, let's see. Maybe we'll have it explained here. Jeffrey, page 41. "It's hard to believe what happened, but it did. I swear it, on my brother Michael's grave. I was riding my bike to school, same as always. I liked riding my bike because then I wasn't stuck in the car with Mom or Dad with nothing to talk about. And I hated I hated taking the bus even more because all that stop and go always makes me sick. So I was riding my bike and I was almost there. I was just around the bend where there's a field on one side and woods on the other when I heard it. It's lucky that I did hear it. It was a faint, crying sound. I looked over in the direction of the sound and spotted a black duffel bag with something beside it in the weeds. It wasn't far off the road. I dumped my bike and walked over. I figured it was a kitten. But as I got closer, I knew it was something else. First, I saw the blue blanket, and then I saw what was tucked inside a shoebox. It was a baby. Oh my goodness, everyone. A real live baby. On the side of the road in a shoebox? I was scared, real scared. I didn't know what to do. I tried helping him the best I could. He was a mess, and so was the blanket. I had no idea how long he'd been there. He had peed and pooped all over, and he felt very cold. I took my sweatshirt off and spread it on the ground. Then I lifted him out of the box, and he started wailing. I wrapped him up in my shirt, grabbed the duffel bag, and picked him up. You're gonna be all right, little buddy. I gotcha. I left my bike and walked the rest of the way to the school, cradling the baby. He calmed down some, and so did I. But once I got to school, I got really nervous and scared again. I rushed to Terupt. The nice thing about being in the annex was that we didn't have to go through the whole school to get to our classroom. You could just get there by walking up to it from outside. As soon as Terupt heard the crying, he looked up. I found him on the side of the road, I said. Can't even imagine that. All right, let's do one more. Just like we did in class, we didn't want to stop. This is from the perspective of Jessica, page 43. Fade in, LS of the classroom. We see Jessica and Danielle sitting in the book area with two classmates. Others sit at their desks, and a few are still trickling into the classroom from the hall. Ms. Newberry is visiting with Mr. Terupt, like she does most mornings before the start of the school day. If you can see, this is kind of like they're giving you a description. When we did Reader's Theater in class, sometimes this would be, remember we were setting the stage, kind of talking about what things looked like. That happens a lot with Jessica's perspectives in these books. Cut to Jeffrey, rushing through the back door with a crying baby in his arms and a black duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Jeffrey, I found him on the side of the road. Jessica, it wasn't going to be a merry-go-round year. We were on a roller coaster that took off the moment Jeffrey came in with that poor baby. The best roller coasters always include lots of screaming and yelling. That's part of the fun. But I wasn't screaming and yelling with excitement this time. I was holding on to Danielle. Miss Newberry hurries to the classroom phone and calls 911. Mr. Terupt rushes over to Jeffrey and takes the baby. He kneels and gently places the crying infant down on the floor. Mr. Terupt, Jeffrey, what's in the duffel bag? Jessica. Jeffrey stood blank-faced, staring down at Mr. Terupt and the baby. Shock was clearly setting in. He probably hadn't had time to think about the situation when he was busy caring for the baby, but once he handed him over to Mr. Terupt, I saw Jeffrey's body go weak. Mr. Terupt, Jeffrey! Jeffrey, what? Jeffrey bends down and opens the zipper of the duffel bag. He pulls out a diaper and wipes. Perfect, let me have them. Jeffrey hands the diaper and wipes to Mr. Terupt. At least they left him with something, Mr. Terupt said. Jessica, I don't like saying this, but when Mr. Terupt undid that little baby's dirty diaper, it reeked worse than Danielle's barn. I had to turn my head away to keep from gagging. Miss Williams enters the classroom, unprepared. Oh my goodness! Her hands fly up and cover her mouth. Miss Newberry walks over and hugs her. The two women are both teary-eyed. Jessica, I understand why they were crying. This baby had been left on the side of the road. Where were his parents? I thought about Anna. How would she react to all of this? I felt Danielle squeeze me, and that gave me some hope. I knew her prayers were with that baby. An ambulance and police car pulled up to the classroom. The paramedics and police officer hurry inside and take over for Mr. Terupt and Jeffrey. Mr. Terupt stands and puts his arms around Jeffrey and pulls him close. Miss Newbury walks over and leans into Mr. Terupt. She puts her head on his shoulder, and he wraps his other arm around her. "Don't worry, everything will be okay," Mr. Terupt said. Would it? Mr. Terupt was playing the role of the comforter, trying to make everyone feel better. I wonder, would he have told us the same thing last year when he was lying in that coma? Would he have said that to us then? "Don't worry, everything will be okay." He would have been right. I hope he's right this time. Paramedics tend to the crying baby. They check him all over with various instruments and then hook up an IV. "Ms. Newbury, I need to go to my classroom. My students are wondering where I am." Mr. Terupt, "I know, go on. It's okay. I'll see you after school." Ms. Newbury leaves, her eyes welling with fresh tears. That couldn't be the only time I saw Miss Newbury with tears in her eyes. Peter, running into the classroom and stopping, Luke, Lexi, and Anna burst in right after him. They all look paralyzed. They are statues, unable to speak or move. A paramedic lifts the baby off the ground and carries him into an ambulance. A second paramedic walks beside them, holding a bag of fluid that is attached to the baby. We see the ambulance doors close. We watch it drive away. Paramedics, boys and girls, those are normally people who come to the scene first, and they actually will bring whoever's hurt, injured, or sick to the hospital. So they are the ones that kind of get them to where they need to go. A very important job. No one has moved. It remains silent. The camera zooms in on Luke. "Mr. Terupt, where are those babies' parents?" Fade out. Okay, I am going to end there. One of the things that this author always does, and we've talked about this in class, it's the question, how does the author engage you? How does the author make you want to continue reading? That's a tough task, right? And when you're an author, you have to make sure that what you're writing keeps people wanting to read it. So I think one of the things that this author does is he leaves us in suspense at the end of a chapter. You always want to read one more, figure out what's going to happen, and that's one of the things that he does, one of his tools as a writer. So I hope that you enjoyed today's read aloud. We got 3 chapters done. We are now on page 48, and tomorrow we'll be reading that, and it's in the perspective of Luke. So I hope to see you there, and I hope you are enjoying Mr. Terupt Falls again.